we are in a situation where we've got a 36 points coming up on $9 trillion national debt. It's about 323,000 per taxpayer. And the question is, what is the impact of this big, beautiful bill going to be on that? I know we're talking about extending the Trump tax cuts, a lot of other good things in there. Obviously, we want that. But does this blow out the debt and make it worse? Thomas Aiello is with us. He is a vice president with the National Taxpayers Union and a great organization that does awesome work for the American people. And Thomas, how are you, sir? Welcome. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Jeff. Thanks for having me on, and it's great to talk to you and to your listeners.
Tell us a little bit about the National Taxpayers Union, Thomas.
Yeah, sure. So we're the nation's oldest taxpayer advocacy organization. We were founded back in 1969 when the federal debt was much lower than the $36 trillion it is now. But what we do is we advocate for taxpayer issues in all 50 states and, of course, in Congress and to the administration. So, yeah, it's a very fun time to do tax policy with President Trump in the White House and Republicans controlling both houses of Congress.
Tell us about the Trump tax cuts and how that can be extended and what really is at play here. Why is it so important to extend the Trump tax cuts?
Yeah, absolutely. So yesterday, the House of Representatives passed President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And what that bill does, it does two really big things. One, it extends permanently the Trump tax cuts, which means taxpayers won't face a $4.5 trillion tax increase at the end of the year. So it locks in the doubled standard deduction, it locks in lower tax rates across the board, and it locks in the doubled child tax credit. And all of those things are so important for us as individual taxpayers because it means we get to keep more of what we earn and we send fewer dollars to Washington. And on a business side, it increases the small business deduction from 20% up to 23%, and then it locks in some of these pro-growth elements of TCJA, which was the immediate write-off of capital expenses. So if a business or a manufacturing center wants to build a factory here in the United States, they get to write off those expenses immediately. It's really good for growth and really positive. So all of those things will be locked in thanks to what House Republicans did yesterday. And then on the spending side, it is really the most conservative taxpayer savings bill that's ever passed the House of Representatives. It finds about $1.5 trillion worth of budget savings over the next 10 years, which
now,
is really
here's
important.
Where let me jump in and mention a guy named Thomas Massie. And Thomas Massie, and I think Warren Davidson, who is also, I think, one of the founders of the Freedom Caucus, voted against it. And they pointed out that, this is going to massively increase the national debt, and these spending cuts aren't happening until later, and that future Congresses could, make sure that those don't happen. I mean, we've always, on the Republican side, been involved in scams where they raise taxes and they're supposed to offset them by cutting spending, and they never seem to get around to cutting the spending. So they have strong opposition to this, saying that it grows the national debt. Does it?
It does, but it does so because it allows people to keep more of what they earn, right? We know Washington has a spending problem. We think that people should be able to keep more of what they earn. Now, what Thomas Massie and Warren Davidson get absolutely correct is that it does increase the debt and the deficits, but it at least tries to make an effort, and it does because it saves $1.5 trillion, to have that conversation to repeal some of the boondoggles of the last administration as relates to climate funding and some other really bad policies. So it claws those back. But they're absolutely right that the debt and the deficit should be a top concern. And luckily, them and the Freedom Caucus moved the bill from when it was first introduced to the bill that passed yesterday in a much more taxpayer-friendly direction, right?
Why wouldn't they just remove every Biden climate provision that Biden enacted? Why don't they just get rid of all of it?
Yeah, I mean, it claws back hundreds of billions of dollars in Biden funding. So it at least starts that conversation. Now, what we have to remember is that the House has such a slim majority, the slimmest in history. And what Speaker Johnson was able to do is really a political masterclass, because he had a balance what some of the moderates wanted and the Freedom Caucus wanted. And at the end of the day, I think we got a bill that was closer to what the Freedom Caucus wanted than what the moderates wanted. So the right to have that conversation and start that conversation, it makes the most transformative changes to Medicaid in American history. It really is a big taxpayer savings across the board. Now, is there more work to be done? Absolutely. And I think as the Senate works on it, we're going to get even more spending cuts, and it's going to refine the bill even further.
Yeah, Ron Johnson says, he's not going to be pressured, and that he's going to work on spending cuts, and hopefully he will. And I think he's one of the best we have in the Senate.
Definitely.
So
yeah.
I do hope we get an even better bill. I mean, I told my audience that if I was in the Congress, I probably would have held my nose and voted for it because the president wanted it, because, it does good things. Although I hate to see the debt continue to spiral out of control. And I mean, Massey was talking about massive increases in the debt because of this. What about Doge? None of those findings have been codified in the law, right? I mean, none of that has been really, I mean, they're just advisory in nature, correct?
So two things. One, as it relates to the spending cuts that the House passed, only one party in Washington is talking about spending cuts, and that's the Republican Party. And I think that's a really important point to make. But as it relates to Doge, a lot of the savings have already been locked in from what the administration has done on their own. So that taxpayer savings is already locked in. You don't necessarily always need the legislative branch to codify it. There's more, and of course all of that is going through the legal process. But if you do want to lock those savings in for the long term, so it does need to go through the legislative branch. And I don't think they wanted to include it because even though it would result in savings, they want to wait for the actual appropriations process to do that. So even though they might not have been included in this bill, doesn't mean they're off the table, both from what the Senate does and from the appropriations process before the end of the fiscal year in September.
So, I mean, this is just an ongoing battle. I mean, ongoing effort to try to move us in the right direction. You sound like you're very optimistic, that you think this is really a big step forward, which is good to hear, because obviously under Joe Biden, he added more to the national debt than any other president in American history. So he was a big spender, although sadly in the Trump term one, we added a lot to the national debt too. I mean, it was a big increase as well. So, I mean, at some point, we're going to have to address that, right, Thomas?
That's right. And I think what the Republican conference is doing is they're trying to do that with reforms to Medicaid. You save almost $880 billion from the Medicaid program by encouraging work over welfare, getting illegal immigrants off the program. And then as it relates to the food assistance program, it also includes a work requirement and other fine savings of over $300 billion. So right there, you're saving a significant amount of money. And I think the frustration that a lot of people have is that $1 trillion is a lot of money, but when you're talking about a $36 trillion debt, it's just a drop in the bucket. So we need to continue to have those holistic conversations about how do we make sure we're keeping taxes low for everybody, not adding a lot to the national debt, and then ensuring that the government programs that people are getting are targeted to people that actually genuinely need them and are operating in the most effective and most accountable way possible.
So these Medicaid cuts are only people that really shouldn't be receiving it anyway. We're talking about illegals, right? People that are double dipping, that are receiving it in multiple states. And I mean, we're talking about cutting out fraud, correct?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Though I think the Congressional Budget Offices estimates 1.4 million illegal immigrants are on the program. Many others are taking the program in 2 different states. And then most egregiously, you have able-bodied adults who are choosing not to work that are able to receive the program. And what the Republicans say is that's a genuine unfairness, right? You have people that are able-bodied choosing not to work, and they're prioritizing those people over people that genuinely need it. And that's just a genuine unfairness in the system. And what
well, that should have been. I mean, I thought that was corrected back in the Clinton era. I mean, they supposedly got rid of that back then, but I guess they didn't. So
yeah, fortunately, Obamacare expanded it.
Yeah. All right, Thomas. We'll do it again, and appreciate your insight. Thank you for all of this good information.
Yep.
And
Thanks,
keep up the great work at the National Taxpayers Union, an excellent organization that we've had on the program many times in the past. All right, we'll take care of some business. Thank you, sir. Quick time out. We'll get a news